Dear listeners, like there is a moment in every life where the weight of who we have been meets the possibility of who we might become, right? So for some, that moment arrives quietly. For others, it comes after years of running, of choices that narrow the world down to one more hit, one more escape until there is nowhere left to go but a foreign country and a cartel compound, right? So my guest today has lived that moment. He survived it. And on the other side, he found something like most people spend their whole lives searching for a reason to stay. Yeah. So, dear listeners, welcome to Mind Meets Machine. I'm your host, Avik, and this is where we sit with the questions that shape us, the ones that don't have easy answers but demand like we keep asking anyway. And today, as I said, I have a very lovely guest with us. Please welcome Austin Rampt. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Avik. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Austin, for being
Good,
here.
man.
And yeah, and dear listeners, like before we get deep into the discussion, I'd quickly love to introduce with Austin. So Austin is the author of One Last Hit, a man who spent decades in the grip of addiction, fled the country, lived among the Sonolia cartel, and somehow made it back to build a life as a father of five, sober, and running his own business. So I do not want to take much of your time, dear listeners. Let's get started and get to know from him. Yeah. Welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Austin, like most people, they think that addiction is about the substance itself. I mean, it's a drink or something, right? But you lived it for decades. So what do you wish like people understood about what addiction really is beyond the thing that you are reaching for?
That's a great question. I've had a lot of people ask me that. That seems to be a very common one. And I never have a great answer because I think what confuses a lot of people about addiction is, and I understand both sides to this question, but what confuses people about addiction is they look in from the outside in and they say, wow, it's just so clear to me that that is the thing that's killing you.
Yeah.
Why won't you just stop doing it? And I get that because I had people in my life who looked at me and they were like, that is absolute insanity. Why would you continue to go back to the thing that's actively killing you? And I don't have a great answer for that, except to say that something happens within the brain of an addict or an alcoholic. And once we start drinking or using, we have very little control over the amount we take. But as we damage our brains and bodies over time, what starts to happen is we develop this obsession, right? So I know today, if I alter my mind in any way, I have a very high potential of obsessing about when the next one is going to come, right? Next. It's always about more. And so it was never about the substance. It was always about what was that substance doing for me that I couldn't do for myself. And, as a child, I had horrendous anxiety to the point that I had really bad neurological tics. And when I took the first drink, the only way I really know how to describe it is like if you pretend you've been driving in a rainstorm in a car your whole life, and all of a sudden you go under a bridge and the rain stops. That's kind of the way that it felt like. It was like at that first moment I ever really experienced peace. And, I didn't know it at that time, but that first drink was going to lead me into a lifetime of addiction to almost every substance under the sun. And I've noticed along the years, so of the last 21 years, I've been sober 18 of them, but it's not a consecutive 18. It's, 7 years and then 3 years and then 3 years and then 3 years, right? It's like I think I missed one in there. And so for somebody who's like obviously found the solution at certain times, right? You think, okay, well, that problem is behind us. But for some reason, when I disconnect from the community of sober people, which is a big one, when I disconnect from spiritual principles, like being honest, like being intimate with other people, I don't mean sexually, I mean walls down, vulnerable. When those things go away, almost inevitably, my brain goes back to, well, we know how to feel better. And let's go, maybe you can do it normally, just like the rest of these people, right? That's the big lie that we all seem to tell ourselves. And so what I want people to know about addiction is it's a lot more complicated than just, why don't you stop doing that? Because here's the thing, if just putting down the drug or the alcohol was a sufficient substitute, the world would be full of detoxes, not treatment centers. And we'd go in and our sane mind would take over and we would never touch the substance again, because that's insanity to do that.
Exactly.
But there's problems that underlie the addiction always. And so that's really where the root of it comes.
I agree. I totally agree on this. And I mean, when you were in the kind of deepest part of it, then what were you actually trying to escape, or kind of, I would say escape, trying to find basically? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll paint the picture a little bit. I had been in 12-step recovery for 9 years, from age 22 until 31. And I had had a very successful business. I had gotten married, had 2 kids, and then relapsed. Picked up. I had stopped doing the things. I had stopped being honest with people, stopped taking inventory, stopped doing my prayer, meditation, and various things. And when I picked up again, I had a whole bunch of money in the bank. And so I set out to destroy my life in the way I had always dreamed of, which is tongue in cheek, but truly, like, I had enough resources to go really get after it. And what happened was I got Marchman acted, which is a thing that's here in Florida, where if you're using drugs to the degree that you're definitely going to die, they can get the courts involved, and they can have them, send the cops after you and take you to rehab. And so I was in a hotel room in Fort Lauderdale. Cops came through the door. I'm just about to shoot heroin in the bathroom, and they take me to detox and they put me in front of a judge. And the judge says, rehab or jail, take your pick. And I picked rehab. And then after about 5 days in rehab, I grabbed my stuff and left, and they're calling the cops, and I hopped on a plane and moved to Mexico because I wasn't done. There were not just resources available to me, but my brain and that moment was so addicted. I was willing to throw away everything in my life to continue that addiction, which is crazy to think of. And so I ended up moving to Mexico and living in Cancun for 18 months, and then Mexico City for 6 months. And, there was a period of time where there was just nobody around me but people in the cartel, because that's who was going to supply me drugs as soon as I landed there. And so at the deepest point of my addiction, I was running from, here's really what I think I was running from. So I had this narrative in my head from an early age, and nobody said this to me, but I had this belief about myself that if I achieved, I was somehow worthy. And if I didn't achieve, then of myself, right, I don't measure up. And so I was always trying to do the things I thought would make me worthy to other people, whether it's act a certain way in the rooms of 12-step recovery, or start a business, make enough money, right? Have kids, do all these things. But that hole in my soul was still there. And so when I, picked up again, it was really me running from me. But the truth is, I thought I was going to go to Mexico and die. I took enough money with me to kill myself. And what ended up happening is my heart held out longer than my bank account did. And so it wasn't until I actually blew up my whole life and lost everything, and I mean everything, that I really became teachable again, I think is the word I want to use.
And I'd say, it is striking, how often we mistake the symptom for the disease, and we see the behavior, the substance, wreckage, and we think that's the problem, but underneath, there's almost always something else, something quieter and older, driving the whole machine. So, dear listeners, Austin's pointing us towards that deeper layer, the one we have to face if we are going to heal anything at all. So, Austin, for someone who is listening right now, who's never struggled with the addiction, so how does that this show up in the everyday life? What are the smaller kind of version of this pattern, and maybe all of us can recognize in ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's certain ways that our brains work, right? There's a saying that neurons that fire together wire together. And what that essentially means is whenever I have an experience mixed with a very strong emotion, what happens is these neural pathways in my brain are dug, and I start forming these automatic, repetitive, subconscious systems, right? So essentially, I'll give you an example. If I don't know, let's say I'm at a 12-step recovery meeting, and I say a joke, and that joke gets people to laugh, and I have a good feeling from that. What I'm going to start doing, and my brain's going to start rewarding, is if I tell a joke every single time that I share from the podium, because I get good feelings. I get that dopamine hit from that. Or let's say the opposite was true. Let's say I said something and I walked away going, oh, that was really, really crappy, right? I also get that memory going on saying, hey, don't do that again. But on the flip side of things, something that's very interesting is anytime we experience pain as human beings, our brains are meaning making machines. And what I mean by that is they always look for a cause, right? So if I'm going down the street, let's say, and something causes me pain, my brain's instantly going to go to what was the cause of that pain. Anytime I see that pain or the potential for that pain to show up in the future, I'm going to experience fear, right? Fear is a mechanism that is basically built as a life preserving mechanism. But sometimes, in a lot of us, it gets out of control. And so where this might show up in the patterns of normal people is it might show up in gossip. It might show up in speaking about people when they're not there. But the reason that we generally do that is because we get this comfortable feeling of superiority when we impart information like that we don't have, that you don't have, right? So if I go to Avik and I say, hey, Avik, did you see what so-and-so did last week, right? Can you believe they did that? In a very subtle way, what's happening is I'm getting a small dopamine hit up in my brain because I'm gossiping about somebody else. Now, that may be completely and terribly detrimental to that other person, but I'm doing it in a very selfish way to try and feel better. And so these are the little mechanisms that our brain starts to adapt over time based on what it's learned from the day before. I was talking to a guy earlier that was addicted to Diet Coke, right? It sounds like a very minor addiction, but still, we have that reward mechanism that says, hey, if you drink that, you're going to feel better. For me, it's Celsius. I like the energy drinks. I drink them all the time. Or it could be going to the gym, right? For some people, going to the gym is just like an excruciatingly difficult exercise. And for some people, it's just an automatic part of their day. They don't even think about it anymore. And so the brain does all these really, really curious things. And while they may not form as an addiction per se, they absolutely are ubiquitous amongst everybody. Everybody's got these little things.
And like when you kind of talk to people now, what is the reaction you get? They start to see their own version of escape or avoidance.
That's a good question. So, I mean, my story is so crazy. It's so deep in addiction that I think where my story has a lot more pull is with addicts and alcoholics. For people that can go, hey man, I see how far down the scale you went. And even though I didn't go that far, I also saw that you got better. And so to me, that's a testament that, hey, recovery is possible. Because in the midst of addiction, I know the way that it feels to me, like if I'm on a run, is it feels very alone. It feels like I'm the only one that's ever done these things, right? It's so full of shame. And it's almost to the point of being debilitating. But there's something special that happens when you connect with another person who's got the same thing, right? You connect with another addict or alcoholic who's had those experiences and they can say, yeah, man, I know exactly how you feel. And here's how I got out of that. There's a lot of power in that feeling of not being alone. And I think, probably your podcast and a lot of podcasts out there help to give people that feeling like, hey, I'm not the only one.
So, I mean, we all have our versions, and maybe it's not about the, let's say, substances, but the phone we check compulsively, right? And the work we hide behind, the relationship we keep returning to, even when it hurts. The pattern is the same, right? Like reaching for something outside ourselves to manage what's happening inside. So, yeah, definitely. And also like relapse, right? It's definitely a part of a lot of recovery stories. I mean, even if you haven't relapsed, the fear of the possibility must be there. So how to hold that? Like how do you live with the knowledge of who you were without letting it pull you back? So what do you
That's a great question. So one thing I think 12-step recovery does, probably better than most of the other ways to get sober out there is A, they give us a community, but B, as a part of our own working of the 12 steps, it's our job to go back to the new people and grab them and say, hey, and then take them through the steps. And so while I'm years removed from my last drink and drug, it could be easy for me to forget. But because I'm in the trenches with these new guys, because I'm on the phone with them constantly, because I'm taking them through the book and through the steps and through the process, it keeps it very green for me. And I know that more than anything else, the number one thing that'll help keep me sober is being of service to other people. Like the more I can stop thinking about me and start thinking about somebody else, man, the better it becomes.
exactly? So if you have to give one advice to the listeners today, what will you?
Well, I mean, that could change depending on who I'm talking to. But one thing that I have learned, which has been really kind of radically opened things up for me, is that I don't view the world as it is. I view the world as I am, meaning that I, as a human being, and this is probably true for everyone, although I'm not other people, I put this layer of belief over what I witness, right? Like, so for instance, what I'm looking at now, Avik, is you with headphones on, right? And I'm labeling it. Okay, there's glasses, there's headphones, there's a brown shirt. But the truth is, I'm not actually seeing what's in front of me. I'm interpreting it through my own filter. And so I've kind of learned to expand that to my own life, in that if I believe everyone I encounter is friendly and helpful, and that I'm going to go through my day smiling, then that's the type of world I'm going to experience. And if I have a belief that life is difficult and that people are, jerks and nobody's going to be nice to me, then that's the world that I'm going to experience. But they could be the exact same world. The only difference is the way that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, definitely true. So that's interesting. And if listeners wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
Yeah. So my website is onelasthitbook.com, which is also, that's all of my socials. So Instagram, Facebook, just at One Last Hit Book. And I love connecting with anyone. So by all means, reach out.
Amazing. That's really amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links, details, everything into the show notes for easy reference. And I'll say, like, here's what stays with me is like, like the life you are living today doesn't have to be the life you live tomorrow. So, just think about it. Like, it's a deep one. So, and thank you so much, Austin, for being here, sharing your past, and also the learnings that you had. And I'd say it's rare to sit with someone, dear listeners, like who's walked through that much darkness and come out of it the other side and still willing to talk about it and still willing to show up, right? So the listeners, like Austin's story is not just about the survival part. Just wanted to be clear. It's not about the survival, but it is all about who becomes kind of possible when we stop running and start facing what's actually there. So if any of you are carrying something heavy right now, or you are feeling something, right? So something you think that might define you forever, then I hope that this conversation definitely help you and help you to get through it, because maybe, just maybe, the next chapter is still unwritten, right? So with this, thank you so much for being here, dear listeners. And with this is your host Avik, and this is Mind Meets Machine. I'll just say take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you so much.